Hi, welcome to the SnoKing Beekeepers Association, December 15th, 2021 meeting. We're going to start with some announcements, then we'll do some concerns that people have right now in their hive, and then how we are trying to see inside our hives, the usual ways that we check as beekeepers, plus using infrared and using BroodMInder, temperature, humidity sensors, and maybe we can talk about weight sensors. We don't have those yet for the club, but we'll talk about all that. The first announcement is from the Evergreen State Fair in Monroe, which was the one we ran a booth at, we still have hundreds of free brochures, magazines, catalogs, worksheets. Now you can order the catalogs directly from Dedant in Man Lake. Trust me, retailers are so happy to send you a copy. And it is nice to have a hard print copy in front of you because you're trying to think of the name of something. You want to make sure you get the right size and you can miss it in an online description. So it's really kind of neat if you could do that. If you can look at a picture, see the name, see what the price you should not be paying more than is, and then maybe look around. There are quite a number of bee suppliers. Those are the two biggest. They've been in business for I don't know how many years. Dedant, I think, actually is over 100 years at this point. And we have some free copies of the American Bee Journal and Bee Culture, which are beekeeper trade journal type magazines, but some useful articles in them. Then a whole mess of brochures on honey recipes, including some worksheets for kids and a couple of pamphlets for noxious weeds. We will order all over again for the fair next August. So if you could somehow get by here, or I could drop some at Ron's, the hive site demo up in Granite Falls. I bet he'd put them on his porch for you. Actually, Pat frequently does that. We have a gal up in Marysville who often will put things on her front porch so people can pick them up. Sultan, Jessica could probably do it there. So if you got a gardening group, a grange, a church, anything, people are finally getting back together and you'd like to be the expert and bring some literature, let us know because we still have hundreds. Files. During this presentation, I will refer to files. There is a place on the Facebook discussion group and you can go and get to files by clicking at the top of the page on Facebook under More and then Files. So if you can't find it, just ask me. The next classes. By now, I hope a lot of people here have already taken a class, but hopefully everyone has found the website. Actually, it's SnoKingBeekeepers.org. And the next classes will be starting in January, all 3 levels. If you need to review something or want to review something, you can drop in and just sort of audit. If you already have the manual and everything, just tell me. And I can put you on the class email list or send you the Zoom link for that time or whatever. So all 3 levels. The apprentice, there's a very important notice about the apprentice. They want to get the word out. People have traditionally worked on getting their journeyman by here's Pat. And if people have traditionally worked on their journeyman service requirement, it's different than beginner and apprentice, where you basically pass the test. Take the class, read the manual, pass the test. Journeyman, you do a service component, you have someone actually watch you work a hive, and you talk about working a hive. There's a number of components. Go to the state association site and you can see them. Now, in the summertime, they changed the requirement to you are not supposed to do any of those service points, including serving as an officer for your club, until you get that apprentice certificate. So please get the apprentice certificate so there's not a snarl up later. And it's not that arduous. It's just that people sometimes say, I'll do apprentice later. Go ahead and take it during the winter when it's easy. And people who are getting a certificate, there's some in here that I'll be mailing certificates to this week. I will also email you your progress form. And on that, you will kind of see it goes through beginner, apprentice, journeyman. And then there's some experience stuff in there, and your field exam, where you actually talk about how to handle an apiary and show someone you know the basics. You mentored someone through a season. Those sorts of things get recorded on there and initialed by somebody. To help you, I have a form that I give to people in journeyman class and say, here, look at this, see if this will work for you. These are the possible types of service points. Anybody wants it, I'll get it to you. The left-hand side is the official WASBA list. On the right-hand side is just a log sheet they used to use a long time ago, and I've kept it. Just date, the letter item of what it is, description of what it was, the number of points you're asking for, and then who authenticated, who initials that you did that particular requirement. So let's see, Ron, are you here? Maybe I should ask Ron if he wants, do you want to present first, or should I kind of go through the questions that people usually have about this time of year and see if anybody really has a question? Ron, can you find, I don't know, oops. I'm pretty sure you're on here. Okay. I'm looking for Ron. Oh, he might have gotten kicked back off again. Okay, Ron, if you're there, pipe up. Otherwise, I'm going to continue on and hope you get on a little later. Beekeepers in the rural areas do have troubles with connectivity. The beekeeping year is this cycle. By now, you're starting to hear this if you've been in beekeeping or you've taken the beginner class, and we've just finished making sure that we have 60 pounds of bees and brood, starting there at, what is that, 11 o'clock, and 60 pounds of honey and pollen. And now we're doing the winter checks, and we're repairing, and we're planning and ordering the nukes and the packages and the equipment, thinking about the goals for next year. Okay, then we try to build up our population in the spring, maximize our honey production, harvest, watch out for July when the bees are a little short on nectar, maybe not pollen, but maybe the nectar. We've got to do those vero treatments actually year round, but the fall is critical. And then we downsize our stack of boxes to 60 pounds and 60 pounds, and we do this in a cycle. What I'm saying is obvious to some of you, but it's always this January to December, population change, monitoring the stores. I love to do this. You realize we are at the winter solstice. Apparently for a whole week, the day length only varies by a minute or two. And I think we just started that. So check to see if your bees are getting any sun breaks if the sun does come out. Great time to check if you're going to place an apiary next spring. Can they get sun in the middle of winter when we get one of those rare sun breaks? And then almost everybody here, I think, has heard about the miraculous cluster. If not, we're covering it in the beginner. When the bees pull together and huddle together and keep the queen and brood, if there is any, the eggs and larvae, warm. And again, it's part of this cycle, going from here, and here's the boxes stacked up. Another way to see it. And they actually can survive incredibly low temperatures, depending on the number of bees, the quantity of stores, duration of the cold. This slide is directly out of my beginner class. I know, probably looks very familiar. And the cluster, we talk about this cluster. And one of the problems is we hope they all got together. We hope they're close to their food. We hope that they started at the bottom and are moving up. I put the picture on the left on the Facebook discussion group, and right away someone said, they're not supposed to be at the top until the end of the winter, but some hives are, and they do okay. Some of them just go right to the top, no matter what you do. Ideally, this cluster would be at the bottom of those 3 boxes. And temperature, metabolic rate. There's lots of fun stuff to discuss, especially if you go all the way to journeyman. Okay. This is a really good diagram when we ask people to visualize it. And I'm going to stop in a minute and ask you, are you having troubles with any of this? Does it making sense? The stacking order drives people crazy the first year. This right-hand diagram, the idea that you often put a weight on top. We have a lot of wind, and you never know when that windstorm is going to come up. Then you have your outer cover, your telescoping cover, insulation under that, maybe moisture absorbency too. Some people only use one, but two don't hurt. And if you're going to use styrofoam block type insulation, inch thick, 2 inches thick, that goes on top of the moisture absorbency. Underneath that, you probably have a feeder, which if your inner cover is still in, it could be above or below, but it often takes an inch or two. Then hopefully that honey and hopefully the bees start out on the bottom in that bottom box. This is showing 2 deeps. I like 3 mediums. And you've mouse proofed your entrance and something metal, something they can't easily chew through. Ron's trying again. And the bottom board. So, and the stages. We are definitely at the point where you should have done all these things, I hope. If any of these seem like a mystery, you can either ask me later or we can stop now and kind of go through them. But tilting the hive so that moisture runs out the front, you raise the back so it goes out the front. I recommend sliding the mite board in and seeing if your moisture inside your hive looks okay. And if it gets too wet inside the hive, you can see extra condensation, then I would pull it back out, at least part way. You've taken your liquid feed out by now and got dry feed on. And dry feed includes like icing type fondant feed or granulated loose white sugar or in sugar blocks. And there's 2 ways to winterize. And one is with the small top vent with moisture control. And that is the one that people recommend the most on this side of the mountains for beginners. If you have someone who's helping you with option 2, which is no top vent, and you are balancing your top insulation and wrapping and other things, great. If you're going to wrap, I don't wrap until I really see it get cold. I haven't actually seen it get that cold. I'm still getting light frost. Wax moths. I hope everybody's remembered. You've got to do something about those wax moths, or they'll eat out a lot of your really good drawn out comb on your frames. And then I'm up to what we're actually doing now. This, for example, okay, this is 7 hives worth of bees, and I didn't clear the entrances all the way. They could get in and out, but there were a lot of dead bees. So I took my dustpan out and this extra long hive tool I have, and I scooped them all out for 7 of the hives. The other one has a screwed on entrance, a robbing screen. So I have to unscrew that to get it out. That's not bad. It's actually been a month since I've really scraped out all the dead bees I could. Okay, did Ron make it on? Because I'm going to just make a few more notes here about. Hey, Ron, you are successfully on. Ron is successfully on. Okay, let me finish up. And I'd like to let Ron talk before anything goes wrong with the internet connections. Dead outs. Take pictures. Try to figure it out. If you can't figure it out, get the most information you can, and you may figure it out later. Was it starvation? Was it too much condensation inside the hive? Was it just the cluster was too small? Didn't treat early enough for varroa, and the hive was just too weak. And pretty soon when we have those sun breaks, we'll be watching to see if the bees have diarrhea, dysentery. And these are splots on your hive. It can be a few, and that's usually not too serious, or a lot, and that's more serious. And the package versus nuke question is a big one. I didn't try to really go through it. I go through it in beginner, but most of the people here have been through beginner and apprentice, I think. Is there much difference between them? If I don't have a clear-cut reason to go one way or the other, the nukes are like $10 or $20 more depending on who you get them from, maybe more than that difference. I kind of go for the nuke, the nucleus package, in which you have young brood and cap brood and stores, and you're seeing the hive working. Our bee season is so short. That's the main reason I would pick that. And if you've taken beginner class here, you've also seen this checklist, and there's things we can check. We aren't totally in the dark about what our bees are doing. We can look at the weather. We can look at the entrance. We can, like me, scrape out those bees, and the bees I scraped out, nothing looked really wrong. They weren't black, greasy. The wings weren't deformed. Nothing looked really, really wrong on that picture. But I took a picture anyway, just in case I have a question later. So, and we're going to start watching for those fecal spots on the hive front too. I've only ever seen them once last year when the sun didn't come out. And then we can stop here quickly for questions. Anybody really want to ask a question about that? Or is the vote kind of, let's go on and see what else you've got to say, and you can stay as late as you want. Seriously, I have no problem with staying till 11, 11:30 to talk bees. I could talk bees constantly. You know, you might use chat. I didn't say that. It's not considered rude when somebody's doing a presentation on Zoom, at least in beekeeping, it isn't, to ask questions on chat and sort of trade addresses. Hey, are you the person that lives down the road from me? Or does anybody here live near Maple Valley or whatever? So go ahead and use the chat box. And while Ron is talking, I can watch that for questions. And maybe while I'm talking, I don't know if Ron can see it, but somebody can always speak up and let me know. And I talk a mile a minute like this, okay? Some of you already know that. Anything that somebody really would rather talk, ask the question now. So many of you have heard it all before. And you can get in touch with me. And if you haven't taken a class and your question is on something and you sort of need, like condensation, how to avoid it, I can route you to something that shows how to avoid condensation, or there's a list, an article, some slides on our YouTube. Some of our monthly meetings have been on winterization, for example. So if that works well too, you don't have to speak up in front of people and ask. Okay, Ron, I'm going to go start looking for I assume you want me to play. Let me look here. I'm going to stop this share, okay? But we are going into how could data help us? Could we figure out some things are swarming? Could we prevent swarming? Could we decide, the bees are dead, I need to order some? Or everything's fine, my bees are fine, I don't need to budget in ordering bees. Yeah, and I don't want everyone biting their nails off right now. But you can still do, the only varroa treatment that I know of that you can do right now is oxalic acid, either the vaporization or the drench. So if you have questions on that, I can help you. And other people here too probably could, but I can get you to certain materials. Got so many things to do. It actually, with the scraping, repairing, if you're on your second year, ordering more, catching up your journal, make sure you got those notes. And there aren't a lot of sensors. We're going to talk about seeing inside the hive with infrared or with heat, humidity sensors, temperature readings, humidity readings. There's not a lot out there. Okay, Ron, I'm going to stop this one. Go to yours. Okay, wait. I gotta share again. I have to do it again. Share screen. Find Ron. Not that Ron. Okay, you're here, Ron. I just have to figure out where I put you. Down one row. There we go. Yes, once again, I have triumphed over tech. Okay. Are you ready, Ron? Okay, is your volume up? I don't hear you yet. Microphone. Not attached to speakers or earphones.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you now. I can hear you.
Wrong microphone was selected. All right, so I know several in the group has seen my Kloss hive domes recently. It was something that I was kind of turned on to from, I think it was a Cayman Reynolds video, and then I saw some Western Washington beekeepers kind of raving about them. I ended up getting mine from Dayton. I think I paid, it's like somewhere between $13 and $15 a piece. They're pretty nice. They're kind of a thick plastic. I don't know if you guys can see that. Probably about 6 inches high in the middle. All edges are sloped towards the edge, which kind of creates this one convection with the hot air. As it rises, it loops up and around down the sides back to the bottom. And with it, it's carrying the condensation. So all the droplets roll down to the outside edges of the box and away from the bees. One of the things I've been liking lately as I go out and check my hives, I'm probably out there, probably at least once a week now, flipping a lid and kind of peeking inside to see how they're doing, is all my frames are bone dry as far as like humidity and moisture. There's no wet bees. They all seem fat and sassy in there right now. So much so that they've actually eaten all my sugar blocks, and I just had to replenish all those. That could be good or bad. So one of the nice things that I let's see here in that kind of bottom right corner of that picture, you can kind of see the little air channels that they create for venting. That was one of the nice things that I noticed with the hive dome in place. I didn't have to worry about what are my bees doing, what's it like inside. Do I have to open up the hive because it's rainy and windy? No, I can just pop my lid. I kind of peek down into the dome and I can see down through the frames almost all the way into the bottom box in some areas. But they'll create all these little vents to circulate the air. And like I said, the Kloss hive dome is kind of like a big convection oven. So all the heat they generate either from down below or from box 2 rises and then circulates around back down to the bottom, comes back up, heats up as it goes past the brood nest, back up to the top, and then back to the bottom as it cools. I find all my bees right now are kind of in the middle to the top of box 2, just a few inches below the dome. And that's kind of where they've been liking to chill out. My warm way hive, that's kind of my little test hive that I have, which is designed a little bit differently than the traditional Langstroth. I'm finding all my bees want to be on the very top box, and they want to be 4 inches away from the opening, which is they're actually using an emery shim as their entrance versus the entrance I made for them. But they have little channels drawn out through all the frames that allow the airflow to circulate, most effective for them. And it's really interesting to see how they interact with that and how they move the wax, depending on the temperatures outside. Let's see, in picture in the next slide, you'll kind of see the setup. They're really easy to put on. There we go. My internet's getting a little choppy on me. But here you can see where I've set it on top of a 1-inch emery shim. And that's because I have the sugar blocks down there. I'm kind of keeping the elevation up a little bit from the bees. And then I threw my medium box over the top. Bottom right corner, you can see where the medium's on there. My inner cover goes on top of that, and of course the lid over the top of that. And all my lids are insulated. So I haven't insulated the inside of the box over the domes yet. So they all currently look like that bottom right-hand corner. As soon as I pull the lids, you see your sugar, your bees, everything that's going on. And in fact, yeah, that top left picture there is actually my warm way hive, and you can see how all the bees are kind of up dead center and just enjoying the fat and sassy life up there. And then their entrance is kind of on that back side, on the back of the dome back there, and it's on the narrow end, which happens to be facing east. So, and that's how they prefer it. I've let them do what they want to do. But this makes it real easy throughout the winter. You're able to pop the lid, see what your sugar levels are like. Do you have a dead out? You can easily kind of look down and see if you have anything moving around in there. Depending on how your hives are situated and where the wind's blowing and the light and everything, your bees are going to move around through the box. All 4 of mine right now tend to be towards the tops. But on the warmer days, obviously they kind of drop down and they kind of move back and forth. And you'll kind of see in Eli's FLIR pictures, if she has those, how the hive kind of congregates and they kind of move. It'll be kind of interesting to see. But that's the Claus Hive Dome. Like I said, I got mine from Dayton. Man Lake carries them. A lot of places carry them online. I was pretty happy with the Dayton ones. They were the cheapest ones at the time. Free shipping if I bought 5 of those and 3 drone frames, which I think was like $100 for everything. And that was 5 of the Claus Hive domes and 3 of the drone frames. And so, yeah, we got that all set up, ready to go. And then for this winter, we'll be monitoring those and scraping propolis off of frames and getting boxes repaired and all that fun stuff, and get ready for the next few months from now. And it's time to do the spring training all over again. Anybody have any questions on the Claus Hive Dome?
You know, Ron, I didn't really introduce you.
I'm the one that posts all the comics on the group page.
Oh, yeah, okay. And the Granite Falls Hive Side demo and the do-it-yourselfer and the guy who can't resist trying out all these neat ideas like the Claus Dome and the Langstroth Longs and the Warm Way. You could tell them what a warm way is because it's something that was popular in Europe. And I really don't understand why we don't do it.
Yeah, if nobody's seen what a warm way hive is, if you look at that top left picture, that's actually the warm way hive. Now you're kind of looking at it going, what are you talking about? That's a Langstroth hive. Well, basically it kind of is. The difference is that very bottom white box down there, the entrance is on the front side. So the frames, if you look, they're going parallel to the entrance, and the entrance is kind of in that top right-hand side of that bottom box. So as the wind blows through the entrance, it's stopped by that first frame, and the succeeding 9 frames behind it are protected. So it keeps that bottom box super warm. This was one of my more productive hives this year, and it's certainly my most strongest hive I got out there right now as far as size, stores, activity right now. It's the one that's doing the best. I decided to do the warm way hive as kind of an experiment this year. In the beginning classes with Eli, she had talked about the warmway hives, and then of course I had to go, what is a warmway hive, and what's this thing she's talking about? So I ended up making one, as well as a lot of my other boxes. I'm sure everybody's kind of seen my bee barn by now, from previous posts or heard about it. The white long hive that Eli has at the SKBA yard there. So I'm really into trying a lot of these European designs. I'm looking more at kind of like the Siberian territories. What are these guys doing to be able to keep these hives alive in cooler temperatures, or in temperatures similar to colder than ours? And that's kind of where this Klaus hive dome comes from. Is it's used quite a bit in Ukraine, and kind of in that European territory up there, where we got really cool temperatures. And they're overwintering their hives with no additional insulation, just kind of how you see my hive set up. And somehow they're keeping them all alive with this convection of air that the dome creates. So I'll be really excited this year if they all survive and everything works out the way that I hope it does and that I'm intending it to do. Obviously, I'm keeping a close eye on it. If things start to go south a little bit, I will change things up, throw insulation in, and save it. But for right now, I'm just kind of playing it by ear, and just really monitoring the progress of the hives as we dive into the colder temperatures and into the winter. And with luck, we'll have all the hives survive with no dead outs. I think this is our biggest participation group that we've had, 21.
For a while. Let's see, your next slides, let's see, got a blank one there. We can go straight into explaining what a BroodMInder is, since I've got you on and the internet's good. I could show a couple of BroodMInder slides first, but maybe I think actually yours, if you start out explaining it.
Yeah, so as beekeeping kind of dives into the 2021, 22 era, and things and technology improve and get smarter, they start coming up with things like the BroodMInder. There is other brands out there that are similar to the BroodMInder, but the BroodMInder is, in my opinion, it's a little bit better than the other ones that I've researched. They just give you a little bit more detail, a little bit more user-friendly, literally plug and play or pull and play. Pull a tab, you set it, as you see in that bottom right picture, you just set it on the box. Now, a lot of people will do 2 sensors if you have 2 boxes. You kind of pick where your brood's going to be, where you think your brood's going to be sitting, and you put your monitor in that area, just slide it between the 2 boxes on top of the frame. Make sure you pull the tab from the battery first, so that way it activates. Set your next box down, repeat, you put your next sensor in on top. Now each sensor monitors humidity and heat. There is other components, and there's a couple other slides in here that'll show you that other options for the BroodMInder, but this allows you to set it up depending on your membership level with BroodMInder. You can purchase different packages through them, to where it can automatically email you or alert you if the activity in your hive becomes concernable, meaning the temperature all of a sudden spikes in the hive, or there's a significant weight change in the hive, or the humidity all of a sudden does something really that it's not normal for it to do. It'll send you an alert. It'll give you an email, tell you, hey, you need to check your hive. And the bonus part of that is, if you're not around your hives or somebody's watching your hives, you can easily just get a hold of that person and say, hey, can you go check on the hive? If you go through like the POP from BroodMInder, they have a excellent picture in there, and it might be at the end of my slides, where they have a cathedral hive. And I think it's the very last ones.
You can't hear me. I had to put that cathedral hive in because you said you want one. And I said, look at that.
Yeah. So here's a cathedral hive where the sensors had picked up activity. And the person who wrote this story had gone back and decided, hey, I got this alert. I'm going to check it out, see what's going on. And sure enough, they found that the temperature had spiked and the activity was up. And when they got into the cathedral hive, long and behold, as you see from the picture on the right, here's queen cells that are open, and the cathedral hive had swarmed. So well, it kind of gave them a heads up. Not that I don't think, if I read the whole story, I don't think they were able to keep it from swarming. I believe it did swarm on them, but at least they were able to get in there. They're able to prevent any cast-off swarms, and they got a lot of data. As you can see from the graphs, it does log a lot of stuff. It'll do, you can have it log every 15 minutes or every hour. I think I have mine set to every hour. I think Jessica has hers set to every hour. I can't remember, but it'll log and give you this little graph, and it'll tell you that this temperature at this humidity, and if you have some like the weight sensors in that, yeah, every hour. So you can monitor your hive daily as far as, so this, let me kind of go back a little bit. This will actually tell you like your nectar flows, like your honey production. If you have like the weight sensor on there, it will tell you those weight variables where they've brought back a lot of pollen, or as things start building up in the hive and the heat, it can even tell you kind of when to harvest your honey based off of the data when you read it. Really impressive. It's all phone app right now for me. There is, however, one of the slides, there's a Wi-Fi module right there, number 6. So they have a Wi-Fi module. So this is Bluetooth to Wi-Fi. The BroodMinders kind of all communicate with this little hub. This little hub will communicate it via Wi-Fi, and it will automatically upload your hive data to BroodMinder, to the BroodMinder.com account that you set up. And that's how it will set your alerts and alarms for activity, swarming, anything like that. Now they do have another one that's called the Sub Hub, and all that is a Bluetooth expander. You kind of put it out near the hives, and it'll boost the signal and get you about another 1,000 feet, if that's kind of within range of where your phone needs to be able to upload the data into the app on the phone. Otherwise, you can just do like I do. I do the poor man version. I just walk out to the hive, I hit the button, I upload my data to my phone, and I send it off to the BroodMinder account for Eli and Jessica and I to kind of interpret the data. Right now, these Eli, and myself, and Jessica all have the BroodMinder set up in one of our hives. We're kind of monitoring the data that's coming in, experimenting with it, learning a lot with them. There's just a plethora of information to learn from these things, and it really does help, as far as when to harvest, mite treatments, how successful were they, all that kind of stuff. Is my hive swarming? They have weight scales that are easily installed, like in number 5. So that can tell you your honey and nectar flows. And as you see, it's just a little bar. It sits into the front, which kind of tips your hive forward a little bit, and it pendulates off that back little, it's kind of like a little 1x1 of that back end. So the hive kind of puts all of its pressure up front on that little scale. And that little scale will tell you any of the minutest little change in weight. like if they're getting ready to swarm and all of a sudden that thing lightens up quite a bit because they've grabbed a whole bunch of honey, or if there's a bunch of nectar coming in, that thing just all of a sudden gained a whole bunch of pounds like we do on Thanksgiving Day. It kind of goes through quite a bit of stuff on these things. A lot of data that you can refer back to. It's just a collection. It's all cataloged by date, time, minute, and it'll give you the graphs. Pretty layman term. I was pretty impressed with it. Some of the other ones I looked at, they were nice, a little convoluted on their software, not easily shareable, a bit more simplistic, basic, didn't give you all the information, or you had to do a whole bunch of assembly. And if you're not an electronics guru like I am, it makes it a little bit more difficult to utilize those systems. Right now I'm using just the one sensor in my tablet. Yeah, here you can kind of see on Jessica's, if we go back one slide, there we go, there's Jessica's. You can kind of see from hers, here's an array. So her chart spread out with at least 2 weeks, looks like 3 weeks. But you can kind of see the red line, 4 weeks. Jeez. You can kind of see the temperature up above. She has her sensor placed perfectly above her brood, so it's unlike mine, it's getting the actual data of the brood. I need to move mine because they're all up underneath the dome, and mine is sitting below them and not above them. Hers is placed perfect. You can see her hive is sitting kind of right in the normal to optimal range of where you want your brood this time of year. Her humidity is relatively low in the normal range, which is where you want it. And this is just one sensor. You can put a whole array of sensors in your systems and obtain even more information. You can, like I said, you can dial down with the scales and really get down to the nitty-gritty of what your hives are doing. Not the cheapest thing in the world. But you figure, your Nook, when you buy them, are about $200. You grow your hive and you probably got $500–600 worth of bees, and then they swarm on you, and then you're back to $150 worth of bees. This system's about $300, and it can help prevent losing that $250–300 worth of bees in that swarm. And you don't end up giving your neighbor, like I did, a whole big package of bees. The other thing I use with my BroodMInder is I use an endoscope. They're about, you can get them pretty cheap. You can get them anywhere from about $15–20 on Amazon, on up to $50–60. I have a big one just because I'm an RV technician. So I have to use my endoscope for going through heater ducts and that. But I also found it's very handy because of the light and the flexibility of it. I can actually manipulate it through my frames, and I can see my bees in color, real time, exactly what they're doing, where I can't see them through the Cloth Hive dome. So I can go into that bottom box through the entrance. I can see how many dead are on the rack. If I need to open up that reducer and scrape out, it's just kind of a quick tool. More of a nerdy thing that I use with my tablet, but it is very handy. Anybody have any questions on the BroodMInder? I know I kind of was a little bit unprepared. It's been kind of a crazy week.
Ron, any of these slides you want to say more about, or we can always come back to BroodMInder too.
Yeah, we can come back to it. I'll have to look at my slide on this side. I don't think there's, I just kind of put redundant graphs in there that just kind of show like the weight scale and
yeah, this is
like the weekly trend, the daily profile.
Yeah,
this is all three sensors here. So this is your what is it, TM1000, the sensor that goes on top of the box is that top column where it says temperature, humidity. And then that bottom one's going to be that weight scale. That's that little bar that sits underneath the front edge of the hive. And that's going to tell you your poundage. As far as, did you lose a pound of resources in 24 hours? Did you lose 5 pounds in 36? And that's kind of what tells you if you're getting ready to swarm, if all of a sudden those numbers start really dramatically changing on you. Temperatures spike, resources drop. I'm surprised my internet's actually sticking with me right now. And of course, Elon Musk now tells me my internet won't be even better until next year.
I think I might have a later graph of this one that looks better. This is talking about the queen is absent. I think this is the one. They're talking about something happened. Oh, I think they reverse boxes. It says a switch happens. Oh, sometimes, this one's hard to read. Queen has moved down into the lower box, so they're no longer maintaining that 90-degree temperature. If you follow the 90-degree line, brood has to be a little bit above that, 92 to 95. All right, Ron, you think you're finished?
I don't know that I have much more in me unless anybody has any questions. I know I talk a lot as well.
And we can always, this is a little unusual in that we can stop. Usually when I do my 90-minute presentations for classes, people can't get a word in edgewise. I mean, I just jet through it. So this we can be a little more relaxed. I could start showing people FLIR. They could think about BroodMInder questions, and then we could come back. Does that sound good? I need to stop share, find the correct screen. Back to this one, I think. Oh, great. It put us right back where we were, where I was saying that there are very few sensors available. The BroodMInder and FLIR are the biggie ones. And thermal imaging has started to get really big with bees. Bees are so efficient and they use their energy so efficiently. This Scott Debnan is at the University of Montana with their online beekeeping program. You can pay college credit. You can get college credit for your online beekeeping. It's an expensive program. I'm not recommending it really, but he is doing some really interesting stuff where he made a hole in the side of the hive and he was watching how bees heat the brood. 92 to 95, that's almost body temperature. And he ran this thermal camera right up against this hole that he made in the side of the brood hive, put it right up against it, and he used a nuke, so it's not very wide. I think he insulated it extra too, so it may be like only 3 frames, but he could get the camera right up there, and he found out that there are bees who are heater bees. That's their job. And this picture was how he discovered that there are bees that their primary function is to heat. Who would have thought? Infrared cameras are getting really big in beekeeping. We're just going to talk about it at a hobbyist level, but it is something that's been coming up for a while. When I explain nukes and packages, I usually stop for a minute and say, you get paid for a hive of a certain strength. Laying queen, so many frames of brood, so many bees total. Well, how do the growers who are paying so much per hive, say 150, 200, 250 per hive, how do they know that there's that many bees in there? And they can pay inspectors to go and start ripping open beehives and checking, like doing spot checking of a big semi. Or they could use infrared cameras. So here we are. And this is out of the Bee Culture magazine. Remember, I've got some free copies of that if you get interested in seeing a copy of it for free. It's actually a subscription. And just whole pallets in a wintering shed. You can see whether they're ready to go. I did this shot of my apiary of a row of my hives. I had them in a row under a rain cover, kind of carporting, you might call it, mainly due to a very fierce wind on my ridge where I keep my bees. But it was really interesting to see the differences between the hives. And yes, they're supposed to start out the winter at the bottom. No, they don't always. It's interesting to see where they are. And sometimes they do absolutely fine at the top. Might be partly due to our mild winters. This is Jessica's hive. This is from, it says it's from the front. This FLIR technology is dual image. It's MSX, and you actually have both images. The thermal one, excuse me, the thermal one superimposed on top of the visual image. And your camera, actually, let me stop share for just a second and maybe just show you me, okay, for a second. Okay, hopefully everybody can see me. This is the way the camera works. And that's the thermal image. I got it turned on. And this is the cheap one called the FLIR 1 Gen 3. And it's the consumer version of the professional. This is a $200, this little piece that's attached to my phone. But the next jump up is like 350, and then it goes up to 25,000. So this was a real deal a couple of years ago when I really splurged and got this because I wanted to see things like this. It's a great camera for just playing around in. I mean, you can just look at your hand or look at me. Let's see. Can I get me on there? I don't know if you can tell that's me. Oh, I guess you can kind of. That is me. Anyway, you can play around with it. It's user-friendly. It doesn't focus as well as the one that costs like another $150, but it focuses well enough for the pictures I'm taking. And it has some limitations, but it is interesting. This little extra adapter here is because I didn't want to pay the $150 for the next grade camera, which was actually the one that was supposed to fit this phone. So I fudged with a little adapter. So if you look at FLIR 1 Generation 3, that's what I took these pictures with. Let me go back to sharing. And it wants me to do, I have to always look at what it wants me to do. Okay, yes, okay, we are back. So I use this camera to take pictures of like Jessica out in Sultan. This is the Sultan hive side demo that we'll arrange dates and times for people. It's just a really good thing to be able to see somebody else's hive. But everything worked out perfectly in this hive. You'll notice those bright spots down at the bottom of the hive. And you can see that the brood is where it's supposed to be. And then there's honey. It's pretty warm up. The honey is very insulating. And actually it is a problem on this hive. I took pictures of Ron's hives, like he mentioned his barn hive and his warm way. And I have them and I can show them to you at the end. But I took the pictures when it was raining, and the camera does have a couple of faults. And one is it picks up rain. It detects moisture, which is part of what people use it for. As a matter of fact, without even buying the $200 cheap version like I have, it's quite possible that you know somebody in construction, various kinds of repair, plumbing, electrical, all kinds of remodeling construction where they need to locate lines or hot spots or water leaks because water absorbs heat differently. And there's a factor called emissivity. I do not totally understand all the physics involved in this, just that it works and it's really neat. I think I have a close-up of this. Yes. So the center of this, that was the software, Thermal Studio. That was the whole software. You download, you can put it on your computer. You can work offline. I prefer to. And then take your pictures on your camera, send them. I send them to my computer. Google Drive is the easiest way for me, but you should be able to send them as PDFs, basically. PDFs, I'm sorry, JPEGs. So here's the information up close, and this is, it shows you, and you can match box for box exactly where your cluster is. When you're working on your hives, you notice very early on that they have favorite sides of the hive, that they like to put the brood a little closer to the sunny side or the afternoon side of the hive. They pick where they put things, and the same they do it in the wintertime. So this is more technical stuff than I need. Some of the temperatures I think are relative. Oh, and I didn't change the scale to Fahrenheit. You can change, it's really easy to change the scale to Fahrenheit. Didn't do that. So it's showing the sky is very dark. And then the bushes behind it showing is emitting some heat. So I was going to say 0 degrees centigrade would be freezing. It was chilly out, but it wasn't freezing. And then I took a lot of different angles. You can run them all on one big report. You can import the files right off your computer into this Thermal Studio. This is the free version. For 1 year, you can have the free. I don't know if you have to pay after that, but for at least a year, you can have the free subscription, and it's pretty good. There's things that you can do with, if you were in construction or something, or a professional beekeeper, and you're processing huge amounts of hives, multiple apiaries, and you're doing batch reports of various kinds. The price, I want to make sure I put the price in. So it's still what it was 2 years ago, $199.99, basically $200. Most of the information you'll find on how to use it is for the FLIR 1 Pro, but it's actually the FLIR 1 Gen 3 that retails for the $200. And Amazon and various people sell them. The connectors is a little funny. If you have an Android, that's how I ended up with the funny little adapter thing in between. Plus, I sort of fudged and bought the cheaper one. So here's Jessica's hive again. That was the hive we just saw the report on. And what we saw before on the temperatures, they've graded the areas that are the brood zones, because that's what beekeepers are often the most interested in. Oh, sorry, I think, oh, okay. I'm going to skip that couple of slides that I put in there. This is, again, Jessica's, we called it SnoKing 2 Sultan. And this is half of her period. Okay. Actually, I have this mislabeled. This is November 12th to December 12th. This is a full month that we were looking at before. And the temperature and the humidity, the sensor collected both. Some are only temperature sensors, but more and more they've gone to temperature and humidity. And the gray bar across is the range. You're going from November 12th across. I did cut this at December 1st so I could blow it up a little more. But the recorded range that we have on this particular long graph was till the 12th. What's interesting about what was happening in Jessica's hive is that it's up here in the brood zone. So there's brood close to that sensor. Bees don't bother to heat things to 90 degrees unless they have brood there. So in that 92 to 98, they can't, I believe brood cannot go beyond about 98. Getting much higher than that, it will actually hurt the brood. So there's clearly brood here, clearly brood here. The brood nest might have moved, except that it stays really close and comes back up for a little while. And it's interesting watching the outside temperature. Bees do an incredible job. Look at the dip in temperature here. This is clearly freezing. And then a couple of other bottoms on the outside temperature, the ambient temperature. And ambient is actually very close to what is in the unheated portions of the hive. So it's freezing here. It's almost freezing in the parts of the hive that don't have brood. The bees are pulling in to take care of the brood. The humidity. Humidity is lower in the winter. Just kind of neat to see some of this stuff we talk about, that they have to keep it up when there's brood, and then they can drop it some. It almost looks like they they backed off on raising brood and then came back, did a little bit more, and then I did the second half of this. Yes, November 29th through December 12th. I did the second half of the graph. So you can see now there's a fall. I think the brood is emerging, and I think that's going to be it for a little while, because this line here is 80 degrees. You might not catch how much of a difference that is, but going from 90 at the bottom of the gray bar down to 80, 92 to 95 for brood. The queen needs to be kept at 68 to 70. So what remaining brood there is may not be too close to the sensor, or that may be the excess heat that the bees are still producing as they settle down for the winter. Humidity isn't as helpful in sensors as you might think it would be. It's more interesting actually in how much the outside stays close to 100. I find that fascinating. We're almost always maxed out. And the same is true of our home weather station. We're really close to 100% humidity a lot of the time. Sorry, I got a bunch here. Oh, I was going to move over. I'm going to stop share. I'm going to move to the official BroodMInder if anyone wants to stay on. I'm going to switch. BroodMInder sent us a 75 slide presentation, and we looked at it and said, well, about 25 of them look interesting. So Ron's already covered some of this, but since they sent us this, it was nice of them to send us, and I'm sure we can share the presentation if there's anybody who wants to use it for something. Okay, slideshow. Yes, they sent this. They're actually pretty nice people. They're do-it-yourselfers. They're people who are easy to talk to. They're beekeepers. Sometimes when you buy a sensor, for example, the infrared camera, you're going to have the FLIR. You're going to have a little bit of difficulty figuring out how it's going to work in a beekeeping without going on YouTube and trying to figure out how beekeepers are using an infrared camera. But they point out that even if you're inspecting your hive for 30 minutes every 2 weeks, you're always wondering what's going on in there and what you're missing. And these sensors, the FLIR and the BroodMInder, kind of fill that gap. It satisfies your curiosity. What are those bees doing in the dark? And then I like seeing how the outside temperature and the inside temperature, whether they have brood or not, how things level off, get erratic on those graph lines. You can also join various citizen science projects. BroodMInder's working on one, seeing if they can get enough data to really do something with it. And for any of you that might be thinking of going past journeyman, you need a research project for the craftsman or the master level. So this is something I think could be really fun to work on with friends, a club, even doing surveys, do-it-yourself projects. That's why Ron's really interested. He's got all kinds of plans already. Ask him about the Raspberry Pi computer and that sort of thing. He's got more plans going all the time. And there's lots of resources, and we can get them to you. And I'll put some on the website, the SnoKingBKA.org. Try to get it together. We already on YouTube have 2 public playlists. We have some unlisted ones. Those of you who took classes, you have unlisted playlists for your class recordings. But we also have 2 on there from some conferences. There was the 4th International Hive Monitoring Conference and the WASPA 2020 conference. And BroodMInder comes up on both of those. BroodMInder has a website, and their user guide is available online. I have some graphs from that, And I think that if you actually want to know, is it worth it? How much would I get out of it? And even if you don't, reading someone else's data, I think if we do this at the 3 hive site demos, just that is enough to get a good feel. If the bees are doing something at this time of the year, and in Granite Falls at this altitude, and then my 476-foot altitude where I am, and then Jessica must be about 100 or so, 150. Jessica can put it on chat. It's kind of neat to know, okay, when are they waking up? When are they brooding up? When are they stopping raising brood? And Jessica's in a pretty sheltered place, I think, which is good from wind and such in the Sky Valley area, the Skykomish River Valley, running out along Highway 2, headed up to Stevens Pass. And so that's a fairly wind protected in some ways. Jessica can disagree with that later. The user guide is really good. It has instructions for tech dummies. Even I can follow it. And then Melisfera is like the bigger company for BroodMInder that handles a lot of the data. So there's a lot of help out there, a lot of information. See, here's the tech dummy instructions. You open your phone app. What do I touch? This is not obvious to me. Trust me, I am not, it's not immediately obvious to me. They go through it in the user guide. They understand people like me. With BroodMInder, what can you do? It's not swarm detection, it's swarm detection. But there are certain things that you can look at, and they go through it in the presentation they sent us. And we always stop by 8 talking for sure. But I think I can finish. It's only, I guess, about 7:35. Swarm detection, but it's swarm detection after the fact, as Ron pointed out. Looking at how much mite treatments impact the hive. Some of those treatments that we put on the hives for Varroa, they stink and acidic, and you wonder how much are they hurting the bees or irritating the bees. And by the way the bees react, and the temperature of the hive goes up, maybe humidity levels change, we can see how much the bees are irritated by the, if we didn't already know, by the Varroa treatments that we're doing. Fall feeding, that can be really fun to see too. I had to leave out the slides at the end where they went through a number of members' data, but let's start with swarm. Oh, the setup. And Ron went through this. If you have 2 sensors, you would place as close as you can to the center or above the brood, and then, and maybe up in the honey super too. So especially if you have the kind, they've got a special one out now, the T2SM for temperature and swarm detection. And then up above, they recommend that you use their TH, temperature and humidity sensor. And the scales have to be absolutely level. So it's not the optimal type of scale, but it is on the same hive and it is the same system. So if it gets collected and you don't need all this cell hubs, you do end up using your own, I guess it goes through my Wi-Fi in my house out to the internet. If you are near a cell tower, it can get sent that way too. This is more for people who are in very rural areas and their phones cannot easily Bluetooth. It Bluetooths to your phone, and then your phone needs to get the data up onto the internet via Wi-Fi. Event detection. Oh, good. Here we go. Okay, brood rearing. By temperature alone, the difference between the 90s and 70. So, also you can tell when a queen has been removed from the hive and a new queen is being raised, or it's being a while before there's a fully functioning laying queen in there. All the brood, all the eggs that were laid by the previous queen are going to emerge, worker brood, 21 days after she's removed. You can see that. And then you can see when there's brood coming back. You can see if you've lost a queen. Swarming, you see after the fact, there's a temperature peak in the brood nest, the bees are more active. And then there's a rapid weight drop when the bees exit the hive and come back. You can see colony size. Is it growing properly or shrinking properly towards the end of the year? How well the colony can maintain an even temperature despite the outside ambient temperature varying tells you how healthy the hive is and how big it is, how strong it is. Robbing, you can see robbing. And there's a few graphs that I put in here, and if they're not clear, these are straight from, if these aren't straight out of the user guide, they'll make sense when you go to the user guide. If you lose a queen at 0 point and there's brood in the hive, that top red line is the maintained hive temperature. The workers have to keep it up in that gray brood zone. But at the end of 21 days, if there's no brood in the hive, they're going to let it fluctuate. They don't need to keep it as in such a close range. And then when they have brood back in the hive, lo and behold, they get that red line back up into the brood zone. So you can watch this happen. This was from April 6th to May 24th. So they watched it happen over that period of time. Oh, and they also used a scale to see weight changes too. This is the same graph, and they sort of marked things on it. And you can actually do that on the app. You can actually tap and mark a certain point when you've opened the hive, reversed the supers, you've done something that you want to make a point of saying. Put a super on, took a super off. You can tap and make notes. So this is the same thing. 21 days, all the brood emerged. Oops, no brood. Crazy temperatures within range. The bees are okay. They didn't really go, they didn't really let it go below that 70 that maintains a queen alive. And if you are reading these really carefully, you can actually tell that something happened when you get a peak that's out of the ordinary. I think they pointed, I don't think I put it in here, but that was a mating flight. You can tell when bees go on a mating flight. Now, this is one of the things that I always heard discussed, but never heard actually anyone say that for sure it happens, that swarms leave and come back, that there are small swarms that leave with the mating flight and come back with the queen, that she does not always leave unescorted. And here's one of these where they're showing that the weight of the hive dropped in the middle of the day. So this is, the swarm leaves just before 1 p.m., 1300 hours, and returns less than an hour later. And you can see that happening. And the interesting part is they leave, and the temperature actually rises after part of the hive leaves and the hive. It's an interesting thing. Apparently agitated, communicating. And this is showing another hive that they had 2.5 hours in which they did an agitated high activity, raising the heat of the hive. And when they really raised the brood nest was after most of them left. And you can see the drop in, this is pounds. So you can see the weight of the hive dropping. And that one, I don't think they came back. That was half the hive leaving, the first swarm of the season, not an after swarm, which would be a smaller amount leaving. Robbing. This was interesting. Even without a hive scale, see these spikes happening daily? That's robbing activity. And then it can't, then the weaker colony really has trouble maintaining the temperature. So the temperature of the hive is falling as it's failing. And robbers will come back day after day. This is something you see, and it's kind of interesting to see it in a graph. Is it absolutely necessary? Only if you can't be close enough to monitor your hives and see that cloud of bees in robbing behavior. Mite treatments. I thought this was interesting. They did a couple of graphs in this larger presentation that we cut down on how much effect does it make? That Formic Pro that just stinks. That stuff reeks. And yes, the temperature stayed up in the brood. It stayed up in the brood nest. Did okay. Didn't impact them too much. Although you can sort of see that, you know, that 14-day treatment. Here's where they put the Formic Pro on, July 31st, and then by golly, August 13th, the difficulty in maintaining the brood temperature goes away and it settles down. So the formic acid bothered them, but they recovered from it. On this one, I wonder if it's a bit of a die-off. This took a dip, and otherwise they were fine. Formic Pro just made them drop about 10 degrees, a little bit dangerous there for a brood, but back up again and holding pretty steady. This one, I got Formic Pro again. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just going backwards because I had the Epigar. Not seeing the Epigar here. Oh, here it is, Epigard, and which is thymol treatment. And then oxalic acid vaporization, almost no impact, except this was interesting. There was a peak this time. Something was different about this treatment, no real particular reaction. This one, a bit of a very, very transient reaction. Then Epigard, it looks like they put that on. And that actually irritated them more, but we're going into the fall. So that was probably the brood was falling off anyway. We're losing the brood at September 30th is where it starts to get more erratic. The bees aren't controlling the temperature in that narrow range for brood. I guess they don't need to. Even though thymol is an essential oil, it does seem to bother them. Fall feeding, I don't think you're surprised to see graphs where the weight goes up. And this one is August into September, fall feeding. They made a net weight gain. This one, even though they fed them, the hive as a whole, the weight went down. Important to know. Although I would probably do it by heft. So we could talk on and on. I should show Ron his pictures. There's one chat question. Elevation, altitude, elevation. Is altitude, our altitude, no, altitude's when you're flying a plane, right? Okay, elevation. Yes, Jessica, elevation. I'll go ahead and stop the share, and somebody must have questions or comments on this is ridiculous, or this is really interesting, or this is interesting if somebody else pays for it. Like we do it at the high side demos, but I'd never spend the money myself. Maybe I'll go ahead and stop the recording so it doesn't get too